Welcome back to Success at Success. I'm your host, Kyle Mauch, with my co-host, Kevin Donahue.
What's up?
And we've got Dr. Layne Norton on. Layne, say hi. And
hello. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Awesome. And Trevor Bauer.
What's going on, guys? I'm back again. The first one wasn't bad enough. Promise to make this one worse.
I love it. So, you guys, I'm sure you already know what their backgrounds are and whatnot. So what I want you to do is try to give a very brief synopsis of what you do and maybe something that people don't already know about you, Layne.
I like fishing, shooting guns, and fantasy football in addition to lifting weights. I guess that'll be stuff that people might not know about me. As far as kind of what I do, I've done a little bit of everything in the fitness industry. Started out as a competitor in bodybuilding, did pretty well in that, did pretty well in powerlifting as well. But that interest kind of spurred me into pursuing academics. So from age 22 till age 28, I did a PhD in nutritional sciences, with my area of specialty being protein metabolism, I guess would be the general term. And then kind of got into coaching as well. So while I was competing, so I would coach people for bodybuilding, for powerlifting, kind of anything to do with anybody who wanted to perform better or look better. And then more recently, I still coach, but more so doing writing. So I've written a couple books my first one was on preparing for bodybuilding contests. So there's not really kind of a full spectrum guidebook out there for how to get ready for one of these things. If you want to do one of them, there's no reference you have. Everybody kind of goes and hires a coach or listens to the big jack dude at their gym, which is usually not a good idea.
Right.
So kind of wrote a guidebook to help people do that. That did very well, and I'm just recently finishing my kind of fat loss manifesto. So kind of a different spin than most books you'd find at Barnes and Nobles or something like that. I'm completely self-published. I don't have to filter anything, and it's kind of like how to actually make lasting change, because most books out there are just do this diet, and they don't give you any advice about sustainability or anything. So I actually dug through the literature. We have over hundreds of references in there, basically how to lose weight and keep it off. So that's kind of what I do right now. I do a lot of writing. I do a lot of podcasts, more recently debates. But I've kind of done a little bit of everything in the fitness industry, and this is what I'm doing right now. And I'm sure 5 years from now I'll be doing something different, but probably still in fitness.
Cool. Very cool. Trev, same to you, man.
Yep. I'm a baseball player. I throw small round objects as hard as I can. I don't like to hunt. I don't like to fish. And so perfect balance here. I guess I masquerade as a business owner and entrepreneur. I enjoy that stuff. Video production, photography. Kind of got into all that stuff as a way to balance out my mathematical and scientific-minded side of my brain. I was driving myself nuts, thinking about baseball nonstop and trying to figure out how to maximize everything I do in baseball. So got into some other hobbies. I find it's cathartic to edit a picture or try to create a video or something like that. So it helps balance it out for me. And I guess that's a very short explanation of what I do.
Love it.
And how long you been in the league, Trevor?
I'd say I was drafted in 2011. I made my debut in 2012. It was very unimpressive. I spent most of 2013 in the minor leagues, and then I've been up full-time since, maybe April or May of 2014.
Cool. Very cool. I'll start. I want to have a question for Layne. Talk about the transition. You go from, I think it's very interesting way because you got a PhD. Meanwhile, you're like a bodybuilding, quote unquote, meathead. You're in there. And then you transition now into writing books and coaching and teaching. I think it's really important, especially as an entrepreneur, to be able to transition, whether it's from an old media to a new media to social media to whatever it may be. Talk a little bit about that, going from the transitioning phases, and what were the points where you said, okay, I'm done here, it's time to evolve into something new?
Probably half by accident, to be honest. I think that with regards to social media, I kind of got lucky insofar as when I started. So I started writing articles and posting on bodybuilding message boards back in 2001, 2002, when I was doing my degree in biochemistry in undergrad. And that was fortunate because that was basically social media back then. It was message boards on the internet. You couldn't just go on Facebook and look up your favorite person, interact with them, So that was kind of the spring point. But that also made me really open to social media when it started, because I already got used to kind of these interactions. And so I kind of embraced social media pretty quickly, whereas I think a lot of people will dog on social media. And hey, whether you like it or not, it's part of the facts of life now. If you want to run business, you better be on social media. That's just all there is to it. Doesn't matter if you run a mom and pop shop or if your business is completely online, you got to do something with it. So I never really had much problem with that. I think kind of trying to find out what my brand was interesting. Your audience tells you what works. For example, I kind of for a while tried to sell clothing, and people were like, "Nah," nobody bought it because I'm not a fashion guy, right? So that's not what I'm known for. I'm a science guy and I'm a lifting guy. So came out with a book on contest prep, and I sold the crap out of it because that's what people want. They want to consume my information. As far as the different transitions in business, it really started off in 2005 when I was in grad school. I started coaching people, not because I thought that was what was going to be I would do for the rest of my life, but I was getting probably 30 or 40 emails a day from the articles I would write for different websites of people asking me questions. And I was doing full on, I was writing people routines, writing them diets, and not getting paid for any of it just because I like doing it. Mm-hmm. But at that point, being in grad school and, having 60 hours of your week eaten up in lab, I had to justify my time for spending on this other stuff. So I just started charging people a really cheap amount of money. And fast forward 5 years later, by the time I was ready to leave grad school, that had just evolved into a full-time business almost completely through word of mouth. So I just said, well, I can just keep doing this. I don't need to get a regular job. So I did that for a few years. That was my focus. Then I kind of started a supplement company again. It sold okay. It didn't do great. So I've had a lot of offers to go back into that since I had a partnership with another company. And I've kind of been I'm not sure because maybe it just wasn't done the right way, but it didn't seem to do that well. People seem to want information from me. So, and then I had another business that was, we had basically come up with an online coaching system. So basically you would come and that was going very, very well. And then I got kicked out by my other business partners because that's what happens sometimes when you get business partners and they've got more percentage than you. So actually the book, just being completely bluntly honest, was a desperation play for me. We were embattled in a business dispute, and it was at the same time I was going through a divorce. So I was really, don't want to say I was broke or anything like that, but I, at one point, owed more money to attorneys than I had access to.
Yeah.
And a guy I knew who was an author was like, hey, why have you never written a book? Just I'll help you with it. And I was like, okay. So I wrote it in about 8 weeks and with his help and released it. And it's funny how cathartic, great word you used, Trevor, cathartic that was for me. I actually, now if I want to learn more about something, about a topic, I write about it. because you have to do this literature review, and you learn so much doing that. And so anyways, like right around the time that book got wrapped up and we released it, sold really well. The other business stuff got settled with my former partners, so it was clear on that. And it was funny how, like, as I wrote that, it was like my life kind of wrapped itself back together. So I've been doing the books since then because they seem to do really well, but I've already got plans for other things coming in the future because I know that, this is the way business is. It used to be a business had a life cycle of a couple of years or 3 or 4 years, whatever it was. Now entire industries have life cycles of 3 or 4 or 5 years.
Yes.
So as soon as you ask Blockbuster, as soon as you think you got it figured out, something's going to come up and smack you in the face. So I think it's important to be nimble, but not too nimble, that you're just sporadic. But you got to be ready when something comes up, because if you're not, and you're behind, imagine if you were just now getting on Instagram, right? And you were a business. You got to kind of keep a nose out for what's going to be the next big thing.
Yeah, I think those transitions are very interesting, and I look now for businesses that have 5-year runs, the potential, because you never know, like you said, a potential for at least legs for 5 years. What is the business that we can be in? Because it's not just that. The industry will stay the same. Fitness is fitness. But how people consume it changes drastically. You think of the guys from P90X, they were the biggest thing, with the infomercials. And then, I don't hear much about them anymore. Maybe they're still around. But it's now there's all these new wave folks coming in. So it's interesting trying to find a predictable business system that produces revenue consistently over a 5-year run is a difficult thing right now.
It's hard, and this is a very competitive industry.
Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of scary, right? Because it's fun getting into it because you're like, oh, there's a lot of openings, there's a lot of cracks in the market, a lot of new ways to do things, new technologies to utilize. And as soon as you have a little bit of success, you have to be careful that someone else isn't doing the exact same thing and coming for you. So it's a little unnerving sometimes, for sure. But I guess I was having this conversation the other day with some buddies of mine. It's what is the next thing? Social media came along and is just crushing it, right? And the world's never going back, as you said earlier. It's never going back to non-social media days. But what is the next social media? What's the next Twitter? What's the next Instagram? Is it VR? Is it 360 cameras? Is it? I don't know. I try to imagine what the next thing is, so you can be an early adopter and be ahead of it. It's just so hard to predict, which direction society is going to turn,
Yeah, and I think as long as we provide extraordinary value and we have a compelling story or we play a compelling character, whatever it may be, people will be happy to consume it. It's I look for businesses, I love using the McDonald's business model as an analogy. McDonald's is in the eyeball business. People say, oh, they're in the real estate business. Yes, but they buy real estate based on how many cars drive by or feet walk by. So they're really in the eyeball business, and once you have the eyeballs, then it's psychology. So what's the psychology? Well, they know every human being wakes up every morning. We all have something called hunger. And so they provide the value of food that tastes good, that's quick and cheap. And that's it, right? And so that's a model that has legs and may have legs forever. Although, even the world of nutrition and how we eat and diet is changing as well. So they've had to adopt. But the point is, they have the locations and the places where the people are. So with social media or whatever it may be next, where is it that people are putting their eyeballs and spending their time? And what's the compelling story that has us engage with them?
Yeah, I think the people in the story is always going to be a thing, right? I mean, humans have been telling stories forever, from cave drawings to now these days, 140 characters on Twitter or Instagram stories or Snapchat stories or whatever. So if you can get a good storyteller, I think you're in, and that's where brand managers and people like that have such a huge influence nowadays, is creating that story and that, like Layne was talking about, figuring out what people want to hear from you, creating that story and building that up for you. It's a huge thing, especially with how quickly you can get torn down. on social media. A video surfaces and of something that happened 10 years ago, and all of a sudden you lose everything.
Yeah.
You're guilty until proven innocent, but then still guilty, in the court of public opinion, because everyone has a megaphone right now and they just blast it out there. And so it's so dangerous, especially as high profile people, with the amount of cell phone cameras that are around, the amount of people that, shoot, you can make something up these days that just never happened, and it gains legs on Twitter, It's a really interesting thing to study.
Sticking with the theme, and then I'll let Trevor go, but just sticking with the theme of transition, Trevor, this is success at success, and, to find success at success, there's always a transition, and, going from college ball to being drafted, and you're probably like the hometown hero, and it's exciting, and it's a dream come true, and then all of a sudden you're back in the minor leagues, or then back in the major leagues. Talk about those transitions. I've never been in professional sports, so just give me an idea of what it's like to go, or maybe be up in the major leagues and then back in minor leagues, or whatever, however that works, and talk about that transition, how you kind of deal with that or handle it, or how that works.
Yeah. I guess the way I look at it is I went from being the absolute best there was in college. I won the Golden Spikes, which is the Heisman of baseball, my junior year. Was the top of the league, my peer group, and that gives you a certain sense of I don't want to say comfort, but satisfaction, in that I worked really hard for something and I achieved it, and then I go into pro ball and realize very quickly that I'm now competing against a bunch of other people who were also that. And so there's this swing of, I feel really good about myself. I'm at the top of my game, to all of a sudden, I've done nothing different, and now I'm just not at the top of my game. And so it took me a while. I'm someone who's very driven by personal achievement. I want to win a Cy Young, because that signals to me that I've achieved the highest level of success in the big leagues. I want to make more money off the field in business than I do on the field, because that signals success in running a business and a personal challenge that I've given to myself and whatnot. So when I go from succeeding at the highest level to then being bad, I have a quick rise through the minor leagues. I spent 2 weeks at A ball, went to AA, was going to get called up 3 weeks later. After being drafted that year, my agent called me and he goes, "Hey, I know you've been working on stuff in your outings and you're kind of bored. But if tonight, if you have a choice between working on something and getting guys out, get guys out, there's a chance they're going to call you up after the game." And so I go out there and I go 1.2 innings and I give up 11 hits and 10 earned runs and just absolutely bomb. And calls me after the game. He's like, "Dude, what happened?" I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea. I got lit up. Needless to say, I did not get called up. And then just dealing with that for the next 4 or 5 years. And that was 2012, really until through 2017, the second half of 2017. I wasn't good. It was hard for me to handle that. My to dive in deeper on why am I not good and study everything about it and try to learn and fix it. And it was beneficial in a lot of ways. I learned a lot about the league and what does work and what doesn't work. But it got to a point where it was so frustrating that I couldn't sleep at night. I was just miserable during the day. And so I had to find a way to succeed at the level I'm at now, which was to balance out my off-field hobbies. Actually develop some off-field hobbies, because I never had a hobby. All I did my entire life was baseball. So finding other interests, developing those, actually devoting time to them and committing to them. And once I did that the first time, it was easier to do it the second time, easier to do it the third time. And now I have a really good balance between work and hobbies. And what I've actually found is I still prefer to work than, overdoing my hobbies. But it's fun now, right? It's because I have other things that I'm interested in and can do to get away from baseball. Baseball becomes more attractive because I'm choosing to spend my time doing it as opposed to being forced to spend my time doing it because there's no other option. So it's just about, like, my dad instilled the mindset in me from a very young age. Be an accurate self-evaluator, know exactly where you're at, know exactly where you want to go, and then just develop a process, what you think will get you there. Test it, and then just keep evaluating yourself along the way and keep adjusting your process until you get it. If you're that committed to something, then you'll find, as long as you can evaluate and keep morphing and changing with what's surrounding you, you'll find a way to get there eventually. Might not be as quick as you want, but he always told me to plan for the long term, plan 5 years out, 10 years out, and work with that.
I love that. It's
that mindset's been super helpful.
Yeah, it's like what's the lesson? Get the wisdom, and if you get the wisdom, you're going to succeed, and you can take that wisdom or that lesson to the next thing you do. And as we grow, we mature, we become wise. We become sort of wise men. At first, when we enter into something, it's fascinating. You win the Golden Spikes Award, and that's the top of the top. And then suddenly it's like anyone. You go from big man on campus in college into this professional career, whatever it may be. Nobody knows you, and you don't have experience, you don't have knowledge, you don't have wisdom. So you're the lowest man on the totem pole again. And it's these difficult transitions where you go from, and you go into the next thing, you go to the next. But I think what I hear you saying and what your father instilled in you is get the lesson, get the wisdom, and then adjust accordingly. And if you can do that, you win, and that would be success.
Have you gone through similar things in bodybuilding, Layne?
Sorry?
As a transition, have you gone through similar things in bodybuilding? Like, you're the best in the world. You still probably are.
I think anybody who's had success in anything, there might be exceptions to that, but there's always been some more than others, but there's always been some kind of trial. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And people who think that if you're successful, it must have just been, smooth sailing. And I mean, there's a few people like that, but honestly, I see people who have success very, very quickly. A lot of times they don't last. People who last are the ones who had trials early, failed early, overcame that, and then that was kind of like fortification by fire. You know what I mean? If you understand the mentality that it takes to get past setbacks, you can overcome almost anything, right? So the last 2 years of my life, or I guess I'm a little bit out from that now. I'm living a good life. But the 2 years before that, things were personally and business, bad, really bad. And now I'm looking at the other side of that, I'm like, shit, if I can get through that, I can get through anything, So, but even one of the biggest trials I had was during my PhD research. I mean, I wanted to quit. I was actually on, that's one of the hardest things I've ever done in my entire life is that process, because it's not, people think, the difference between PhD and MD, and there's no disrespect to doctors, that's very hard and in some ways harder. But you do these courses, you take these tests, here's your degree. That's the with PhD, there's not structure like that. It is, you need to formulate a question that's original. You need to test that question, and we don't really have a time frame when you're going to be done. Yeah, you got these classes to take and stuff, but and just that unknowing. So for the first 3 years of my PhD, I had zero research that I published. None. You want to talk about delayed gratification. So I actually got to the point where I was so gun-shy to go in the lab because I'd had probably 2 or 3 experiments just fail miserably. Not even null hypothesis or anything, but the data analysis didn't even work. I couldn't get it to work, what I wanted to measure. So I not even test my question. I can't get the stuff that I need to answer the question to even work, whether it's right or wrong. And I actually almost got put on probation for the PhD program because I just stopped going in the lab because I was just tired of failing. So I was very lucky. I had a great PhD advisor named Don Layman. And if you read into the world of protein metabolism, this guy he's a bad dude. He's awesome. But he was a great advisor, and he pulled me in his office and said, "Hey, listen, I know you've had a rough year. Like my brother was in an automobile accident that year, almost died. But you're at the best place to do protein metabolism research in the world. There's no place better to do it than here. There's no lab better to do it than here. And there are a lot of people who would love to be in your position. And right now, if you're not putting the work in, I understand this is hard, but if you're not putting the work in, there's other people who deserve this spot. So you need to decide, do you really want to do this?" And I remember thinking, damn, he's right. So he never got upset with me, he never yelled at me or anything like that, but it was just like a really disappointed father kind of sitting his son down, having a talk with him. And man, that worked. I was like, you are right, and I'm going to fix it. And so I just you start small. So every single day I went into lab and I wrote down 3 things. And I said, I have got to get these 3 things done today. It doesn't matter if I'm here for 2 hours or 20 hours, I'm getting these 3 things done. Yeah. Right? And I just did it that way. I mean, as cliche as it sounds, one day at a time, one bite at a time, brick by brick. That's how I did it. And sure enough, right after that is when I started getting data. I don't necessarily believe from a spiritual perspective, but just from a pragmatic perspective, if you want something really bad, the universe is going to push you to the brink to get it. They're just going to test to see how hard you really want to get it. There's Trevor knows there's plenty of people out there who had plenty of talent to make it, who never made it, right? And the difference, and they may have even worked hard, but the difference is who's willing to encounter and digest that failure and not choke on it, but learn from it. That's really tough. That's really tough because it requires almost a sacrifice of your own ego to first admit, yeah, I suck right now, or I failed, to digest that and say, okay, what do we do next? So it's the same thing, this business that I got kicked out of that was doing very, very well, turning a great profit. I thought this was going to be the thing that was would be my retirement and for my kids and all that kind of stuff. And boom, in one day, in one meeting, I'm out. And now I'm in a court battle trying to actually get them to pay, my percentage. And I'm in that court battle for 6 months while my money's tied up because I'm going through a divorce at the same time, all this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I think Trevor or somebody said something about self-analysis and being honest with yourself. Yeah. And that's so important. So at the end of the day, one of the things I had to sit down and say was, okay, you had these things going on, you had these things happen to you, but it's also your fault. You went into business with these people. That's great. You didn't protect yourself. You didn't so I'm not beating myself up, but this is the honest truth, right? So for the most part, you create your life. And I think people who end up getting through that are 1, people who learn from failure, and 2, people who are honest with themselves about where they point the finger, right? Yeah. Usually because you're not always in control of what happens to you. And this saying has given me a lot of solace in the last 2 years. I am not always in control of what happens to me or what other people do, but I am 100% in control of how I respond to that.
Amen. Yes.
So but I've taken that and with the book and everything, and now my businesses are doing very well. The worst thing in my life became the best thing in my life. And
great.
Actually, company right now, I don't really care that much. It was the best thing could happen to me. Best thing could happen.
Yeah, I think a big thing there is just how you touched on how you deal with failure. And I think people are scared of failure, especially, I've seen in society these days, right? No one wants to hurt anyone's feelings by telling them that they're second best or third best or the worst, right? And sometimes, that's exactly what you need, as you kind of touched on. So in training, that was one of the things that I learned, going through the struggle early on in my career, is I had to embrace the failure. And so as part of my studying, skill development, and Kev, I'm really interested to hear your take on this. But in skill development, you only learn at the edge of your ability level. So if you're not pushing yourself past your ability level a little bit and working in that kind of 10% past what you're capable of doing and failing a lot in practice, like you're never learning, you're not developing new skills, you're just rehashing old stuff that you already know. So I actually designed in like failure into my workouts. So I disadvantage my body in a certain way to make it something I haven't done to still try to accomplish a task of hitting a spot, or I throw a bigger ball or a smaller ball or a heavier ball or a lighter ball to try to build out the resiliency of my delivery and still being able to accomplish a task. But I guess I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that, Kev, and how that plays with what you do.
Well, it's really interesting because Layne mentioned having a mentor, like a guy who'd already been there. When you've reached your edge and you want to quit, to have someone who's been through those steps, right? It's like having a veteran player, or going into war with a veteran who's been there before, or doing business with someone who can be a powerful mentor. Our brains are built not for performance, they're built for homeostasis. Our brain wants to keep us exactly how we are. Anything outside of how we are is a threat, right? Our brain only knows history, it doesn't know future. But it's also why it's important, and you mentioned writing down those 3 things. Now your brain has a goal to shoot for. But if you have that goal or that vision, plus it's like if you're going into a new town and you don't have a map, like how effectively will you go around that town? If you hire a guide, they'll get you across town in 5 minutes as opposed to may take you all day, right? So having those people in front of you, and you mentioned challenging your body, right? Like activating new areas of your nervous system that have never been activated before. And if you do that in a way that creates success or lessens the threat, and this is what we do in the Brain Lab, right? We work with the top functional neurologists in the world, and these docs have worked with everyone from brain damage to concussions to neurodegenerative diseases, and they know how the brain is collecting data through your visual, vestibular, and proprioceptive systems, and they know how to slightly increase. It's like having a governor on a Porsche. So if you have a governor that says the car can only go 90 miles per hour, that's as fast as the car can go. Meanwhile, this Porsche has the ability to go 170, let's say, or 150, but it's held back by this governor, and our brain acts that way. So when we give it more data, and especially if we have a coach or a mentor or a doctor or whoever's been there before, they can actually push us in a way that we can't, and it allows us to accomplish a lot more. So it's interesting. It's another part of success is we're not islands. We are all connected, and like even right now I'm listening to you guys, I'm getting so much, and I'm like, okay, I need to write down the 3 things a day because I've forgotten about that, like that's a really good methodology. And and I constantly put myself around people who are way ahead of me. Sometimes 1 step ahead of me, sometimes 1,000 steps ahead of me. And I sit there, and it gives my brain the confidence that I'm not just an island out here doing it by myself. Someone's been there before, right? And this is where, Layne, you're in the business of this. You're like, hey, listen, I've done the bodybuilding competitions. Just follow my guide, right? I'm the guide here. So go ahead, Layne.
Well, something you brought that made me think. So, for example, like when I got into this 10, 15 years ago in the fitness industry, you had people who were either intelligent but looked like pencil necks, or jacked but couldn't spell their own name, right? Like for the most part. Or you had some people that did a little bit of both, but they weren't real vocal about it. Like if you were a professor and you were into bodybuilding, it wasn't really like cool to talk about it, So I was like I want to say the first person who kind of really popularized the idea of, hey, you can be an academic and intelligent, and also because this is science, like this is human body, right? And after I did my PhD and won my pro card in natural bodybuilding, there was like probably 6 people who did it after me, like really quickly. And I'm not trying to say I set some crazy mark, because plenty of people have PhDs and plenty of people have done bodybuilding shows. But, you look at, if you want to go to the extreme example, look at the 4-minute mile and Roger Bannister. And Nobody had done it. People thought it was impossible, and then he did it. And I think since the time, the count is like over 20,000 people have done it, including high school kids. And Les Brown, who's one of my favorite motivational speakers, I love what he said about this. He said, did human physiology change that much? No. What happened was people got on the starting line knowing it was possible. Yes. They knew it was possible, and that changed things. And, I think also, if you have a mentor or somebody who's been really successful in something, when you get around them and you see their process, you become less intimidated because you realize that this isn't a wizard. This isn't somebody who just has this magic that they do or they were born this way. You see their process, and while the outcome, like take a major leaguer who can throw over 100 miles an hour, and has an ERA of under 3, that being at that level may seem like an intimidating thing. The monotonous stuff and process to get there is not intimidating because it's not magic. I'm guessing, because I've never been a major leaguer. Played baseball in high school, but I'm guessing it's not magic. It's a very monotonous, kind of unintimidating process. So when you take the magic away and you peel that away and you see that these are just people, now, yes, they have talent. You need that. That's part of your hedgehog, Jim Cole's book I'm referencing. But the process in of itself, what it takes to take talent and go to a high level, that's not usually impressive in terms of the day-to-day. It's just a lot of work. And so when you take that away and you show people what's possible and you peel it back and it's not some magic that only a few people have access to, I think taking the intimidation out of it, now people go, oh shit, maybe I could do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you touched on one really good word, which is monotonous. Success at a lot of things is glamorous, right? Because people only see the final product once it's successful. So growing up, and to kind of connect back to what we talked about earlier in the conversation with this adjustment period, growing up, I went to Dodger Stadium a lot. Being an LA kid, you go out there and watch the game with my dad and try to get there early for BP and watch these guys hit all the homers in BP and try to catch the ball. And it had this, shine to it. This really, man, these are the best of the best, and this is pro ball. And in your head, you romanticize it a certain way. Like, it's got to be this, or it's got to be that, or it must be so cool to be a professional baseball player, and this is the kind of lifestyle it is, and whatever, right? And so regardless of how you try to think about it differently or how many people tell you differently, that's still kind of in the back of your head. So when I got into pro ball, it wasn't anything even remotely close to what I had in my head as a kid. And it was this huge culture shock almost, even though it was still baseball and I'd been involved in baseball culture forever, just because there was that expectation and it didn't live up to that expectation. It wasn't even close. It was a shock for me. Yeah. And I wanted to quit baseball after a year because I hated it so much. And, that was an adjustment period I had to go through with reorganizing my vision of it and an understanding of what it was and how I can enjoy it. It was tough. But I think that's again, why you need to be a good self-evaluator and good at making adjustments. As I could have quit. I was ready to quit in 2012 just because I didn't enjoy it and go back to school and be an engineer. And my life looks a heck of a lot different now than it would have.
Yeah, and
Trevor, because I always. I'm sorry, Kevin.
No, I was going to say, in every business, it's very interesting because you talk about the monotony of doing the work that it takes, and there's these overnight successes, and it's just not normal. That's not really the story. But there's this idea, there's front stage, backstage. And it's we have an idea of what a business might be like, and we typically romanticize it because it's so glamorous. And then we get backstage, and we're like, oh, I see how this works now. Whether you're in a restaurant business or whether you're an entrepreneur online, or you don't know what it takes to do all of that work behind the scenes. And one of the questions I had for you, Trevor, is two really, because you are still an engineer. You're using your body and these really cool things to push yourself to the next level, using sort of this engineering mind. I want to kind of ask you about that, and then also because you're in a super competitive space, and you mentioned earlier you went out and got shelled, right? Like what's that like, being one of the best pitchers in the world, and then going up against the best hitters in the world? I've always wondered, I'm like, my gosh, this is the best guy coming up the plate. I'm like, well, the guy on the mound's the best guy to be going against him. What is it like to have that sort of competitive drive? And what do you do to push yourself to be the best in the business?
That's a great question, and I don't know that I have an answer for you on it. I'm hyper competitive. I loathe losing. It just eats at me nonstop. And so I've had to set a rule for myself where I will give myself 24 hours to be mad and upset about something, and then I lose after that to do it. Yeah, because if I take that away and I try not to be mad about it and just take it as it comes, it just completely kills the fire. And that fire is super important because that's what then drives you forward to not have that happen again. But it would I would be just pissed for 5 days until I started again, and then I wasn't in the right mindset to start, and then I would be mad again, and this would just all spiral. So it's I don't know exactly what motivates me to be that competitive. But it's just I've always kind of been that way. So I guess another thing worth talking about on that aspect is when you're not having the success that you're used to at the level you're at, it is hard to be competitive like that. It's like, oh, I'm going to compete today and I'm the best, and then you get whacked. It's like, okay. I wasn't the best today, but I'll be the best tomorrow, and you get whacked. And then it just happens over and over, and it's hard to maintain that confidence. I had a conversation, actually, with my agent in 2017. After, the first 2 months of the season, I had, a low 6 ERA, and he's like, you don't look like the same pitcher. In college, you were a cocky prick on the mound. And you're not, and you can feel sorry for yourself and continue having it go this way, or you can just do something about it, but you're not the same guy. And I was like, no, I'm not. It's not a lack of confidence. I still have confidence in myself, and I don't really think that it's a matter of being a prick on the mound. It's the difference, and blah 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 on the conversation. And then he planted that seed in my head, that little thorn in my side, and just ate at me. How dare he say? I'm not feeling sorry for myself, and then the next day I'd be like, dang, is he right? And over the course of the next 2 weeks, it took 2 weeks to get me, for that comment, to get me to realize that, damn, he's right. I gotta make that change. And I don't know if it was that only, or if it was, there's other things that I was trying to do to get better and whatnot, but 3 weeks after he made that comment, I had a good outing. All-Star break happened, and then I had the best stretch of my career in the second half of 2017, and then 2018 went well, and so it just completely. But I got that fire back and that competitiveness back, and I think the key takeaway on that I learned was you have to really know who you are and evaluate where you are. But that's not just success or professionally or whatever, it's internally. I have to be competitive and kind of a prick in game for me to be good. I can't be like another teammate who just doesn't show emotion, or someone who's happy-go-lucky all the time. There's all these personalities on our team, and I can't be successful being like those guys. So I figured out what works for me, and I embrace that on the field. And then when I come off the field, I can be happy-go-lucky. I can not show emotion. I can do whatever, just interacting to get along in the clubhouse. And I have all these different moods that I embrace, throughout the course of life. But when I'm on the field, I have to be a certain way. And I think that's a super important lesson for kids to learn is find out what makes you you, and then just be unapologetic about being you and just crush it.
And to have that person tell you the truth. You know, it's like there's a phrase I love, all progress starts with the truth. And to have that person that has the courage, there's a question in the personal development world I learned a long time ago. If you go out, ask 5 friends, what do you know about me and others know about me that I don't know about myself?
I like that.
And if you can ask that question to someone who can be powerfully honest with you and not worry about your feelings, like just give you it straight, oh man, it'll change your life. Like your agent, listen, he has an interest, you know? Hey man, listen, get out there, be who you've been. Like, and that's just great. So it gives you the opportunity to make that adjustment that changed your career. I mean, come on, that's amazing. What a cool story.
Yeah, the honest feedback is so big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny, Trevor. I actually have almost the exact same process. Like, I was laughing when you were saying that because I'm like, my God, is he like spying on me? So I have a rule. If something bad happens or something I'm upset about, I give myself 24 hours to cry about it or be angry about it. I put on sad music. I like make myself really upset, and then I'm like, okay, we're done with that, right? So I won USA Powerlifting Nationals in 2014. I went to Worlds in 2015, so pretty awesome. Like, we don't have Olympics for powerlifting, but that's pretty much it. I mean, there was like 80 countries represented. Everybody's a national champion in their country. I set a world squat record there and got a silver medal overall, gold medal in the squat. So big, huge thing. And then in 2015, I won again. I was a big underdog at nationals. There was a kid coming up that was supposed to beat me, and I got a chance to go again to Worlds in 2016. And I was just so happy because this is not, you have to win nationals. Nationals is 150 dudes in your weight class who are also really freaking strong. So it's not, and you can have a bad day in powerlifting. It's just like baseball, right? Some days you just don't have it. So I got a chance to go again, and I had a hip injury, and I tried to work around it. I got cortisone shots. I did everything I could, and I didn't make it. I couldn't make it. And I remember the day I put out a video saying I wasn't going to go to Worlds to represent USA. I put on the sad music. I cried about it. I got real upset, and I was like, all right, now we're done with that. Now let's work on getting better, you know? And that's, like, I've dealt with a few like lower back injuries and some things, and that's just sports. You know, that's just sports. That happens. People were, you know, saying it's because of how I lifted or whatever. I'm like, dude, you got Tiger Woods swings a golf club and look at what's happened to his back. Like, if you do anything at a high level, if you're, like Trevor said, when you're operating in that 10%, pushing yourself to failure, you're almost always going to border on to progress when you're at a high level. Injury is just so close. You're always right on the threshold. You're always right on the threshold. But so now, like, I had 2 back injuries, but I'm coming back. I just hit like my first 500-pound squat last week, and you know, but it's like that resiliency to keep people. I had somebody ask me, they're like, "Well, how many times are you going to come back?" I'm like, as many times as it takes, because I still have a passion for this. I still feel like, why would I not try to come back? Like, just because it didn't work out last time, it doesn't mean it will work out next time. And guess what? I will never, ever know unless I empty the tank. Yes. Maybe there's no way I ever go to another World. Maybe there's no way I never place top 3 at another Nationals. But I will not know unless I give it everything I've got. And that's the only way to know. And then if I don't go, at least I know I gave it everything I had.
Yeah, no doubt. My buddy Casey Weathers has a really interesting story. I trained with him for 3 or 4 years up here at Driveline in Seattle. High draft pick, played for Team USA he was a legitimate 100-mile-an-hour arm back before there were really any 100-mile-an-hour arms, you know. He got hurt, had Tommy John, surgery got messed up, took him 18 months to recover, had it again, took another 10 months or 12 months after that to recover. Then he was 25, I think, having never pitched really above A-ball. Came back. Velo was way down. Kind of hung on for a little bit. Ended up getting released. Came out the driveline, trained for like a year, got his velocity back. But by the time this was all happening, he's 27 or 28 with no real experience. But he caught on, played in Double A a little bit, had a good year. But he's getting passed by guys who just happen to be younger than he is, and ultimately ends up, retiring and never made it to the big leagues. And he tells a story all the time, like the anti-hero story, which I think is extremely important for people to realize. Like, regardless of all the things you have stacked in your favor, like you said, you're always that close, like a razor blade's width away from catastrophic failure if you're trying to maximize what you do. And you have to be okay with the reality that you might give 100%, 110%. You might give literally everything you have to accomplish this goal and not have it work out. But at the end of the day, what he always talks about is, I would not feel good about myself knowing that I could have done an extra rep on the squat rack. I could have made an extra throw. I could have devoted an extra day along the way, because I will never know. At least now I know. I gave it everything I had. I did everything I could, and I just didn't make it. And I'm okay with that. It doesn't make me a worse person, but at least I know. I think a lot of people are scared to know, and so they never get to that level because they're scared of the fact that they might find out that they weren't good enough, and they can't handle it.
Or they self-sabotage.
Yeah, we see that a lot too.
Excuse, because what if you had everything go right and it didn't work out? You know what I mean? That's tough. That's tough for a lot of people.
Yep. No doubt.
But you build, even if, I don't know your friend, but even if you don't make it like that, the kind of character you build by going through that, usually those type of people can go on to something else and have success.
Dude, he's one of the best guys I know. Just had a kid, can be a great father, can do anything in baseball that he wants. Anybody would hire him to be a coordinator, a pitching coach, anything, because that lesson and that story and that realization and that mindset is so powerful and so hard to find people that can accurately communicate that to the next generation of people.
Yeah, and there's all these unforeseen circumstances. I mean, we get blindsided sometimes, Hurricane Katrina comes through and wipes out your home, or you end up in a lawsuit with your business partners, or the economy crashes and suddenly there you are holding on to $1 million in debt, which is something that happened to me. It's like we're just blindsided. And sometimes there's this surrender. Who wants to go through Tommy John surgery? Nobody. But once you go through, there's a recovery process, and you got to surrender to that process. It's like, I'm sure, Layne, you talk about lifting weights. You also talk about recovery, right? I mean, clearly, there's going to be time to recover. And so it's like, sometimes there's just this surrender to this process that says, okay, I'm broken right now, and that's okay. And it's like people go through divorce or through whatever it may be, and there's a recovery process. But it's as long as we're like putting ourselves around the right people and we have that mentality, we can recover. And so your friend is going to, go on to live an extraordinary life because, and things didn't work out the way he thought. But guess what? They never really do, right? They never do.
Trevor, you said something I thought was really good. You said you had somebody be honest with you. Kevin, you emphasized that point as well. And I think people that we respect, so you need somebody who, I think everybody responds to different things, but I think we respond best to people and coaches in our life who, when we deserve it, we get credit, that they give us that credit when we deserve it.
Yes.
Because otherwise, if you just got the tyrant who yells at you all the time, you just end up tuning them out. But they also let you know when you screwed up, and they're honest with you about that. So I had a therapist throughout the process of divorce and when this business thing hit and all this kind of stuff. And she more became a life coach. Her name was Patty. And man, Patty was brutal on me some days. I mean, she would just straight up, but she wasn't wrong, Like she would lay it out. She's like, Layne, you can't have this if you want this. I'm sorry, it don't work that way, right? And she's like, you can't say this if you're doing this. She's like, you can't say, like, I mean, she straight up told me, she's like, you can't say that you're trying to be the best father you can if you do this. She's like, now, that's also, you don't always have to put your kids first. She's like, that's also true. It's like, you can be a good dad and not always put your kids first, because sometimes you can't put them first, okay? And sometimes you have to put them first. So knowing when to and knowing when not to, all that. But she made me be accountable to that and say, because our priorities are where we spend our energy and time, right? I think a lot of people aren't honest about that. Les Brown has a saying. He says, if you want to see what their goals, what they really want to do is, look what they do. Watch their actions, because don't watch what they say. Because if you say, like, for example, I want to be a major league pitcher, and you're not studying film, and you're not doing all the little things, you're not taking care of your recovery, you're not icing, all that kind of stuff, then you don't really want it, right? Because if you're out partying and stuff more than you're doing it, you don't really want it. You just kind of want it, And she was very good but she also, like, now I've kind of got my life going in a good direction. She tells me, she's like, I'm so proud of you. You're such a genuine person. You worked your way through this. You didn't give up, and you did the work. She's like, and that's why I'm so proud of you, because you're still going to screw up like anybody. You're going to screw up again. You're a human being. She's like, but you worked so hard to overcome this, learn from it, and be better in the future. And I think that's so important. But to have that person, because then, like I said, if somebody's always complimenting you, you tune it out. And if somebody's always negative to you, you tune it out, because you don't trust it. But if my favorite professors, I don't know how you are, Trevor, with coaches, but I'm sure for me it was always firm but fair. You know what I mean? Somebody, when they were a hard ass, when they needed to be a hard ass, that was great for me. But somebody who also knew that they couldn't just yell at me and tell me how crap I did all the time, that was also great for me.
Yeah,
it's a roadmap, right?
Well, yeah, and to have the courage to hire a therapist. Like, I think therapy is so underrated. To have the courage to say, I mean, it's no different than having someone at the squat rack spotting you, like encouraging you, pushing you, but having this therapist to see, because you're inside the frame of your life. You can't see it. And they're outside the frame. They're like, hey, man, look, it's like having someone have the courage. Hey, man, you got something between your teeth. It's like you look a little funny.
You can't be objective with yourself.
You just can't. And so it's really cool to have the courage and the foresight to go out and hire a therapist, life coach, put yourself in a program about personal development, listening to Les Brown, like getting these different perspectives, from different areas of life. I've spent a lot of time traveling the world. I've spent time with Buddhist monks, Muslims, Jews, Christians, Hindus, in some of their sacred ceremonies, just because I wanted to learn. I'm like, what the, it was so strange to me, but if I get a little insight from them, I could add that to my life. And another thing I love to do in my life, I love to pick historical figures, people who changed the world. Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., Jesus, Teddy Roosevelt. Pick your historical figure and choose them as a mentor and sort of study them and, how were they able to do this? How were they able to accomplish the things they accomplished without armies or great nations? Like, how could I pick up like 1% of who they are as human beings, add that to my life so I can be a better man? So it's like, I like taking different perspectives, hiring a therapist, life coach, going to personal development, listening to people, and then studying other mentors. And even, just a conversation like this, I'm getting so much out of this right now. It's like other men out there doing cool things in different industries and different areas. So very cool.
I think self-reflection is important, but I think if you got somebody else to help you with that, that's really good. And Trevor, I actually wanted to bring up one other point for you, is that baseball is a tough sport, especially like mentally, because it's not like all sports are moving so quickly. In baseball, you've got time. You can really get some thoughts in there, especially if you're like a starter, and you're going once every 5 days. And then even between pitches, when you've got like a minute, you can get some thoughts in there that can really get you in a bad place. That is a tough sport.
No doubt. Yeah, people joke about baseball that 90% mental. That's kind of true. Like the brain is so powerful. It can lead you in great directions. It can accomplish fantastic things, and it can just as easily inhibit you and limit you, like we talked about earlier. And I've actually had to train myself how to not think and how to kind of flip the switch between an internal thought and an external thought, a performance thought and a training thought. They're different. And you need all of them to be the ultimate fully evolved version of yourself. But if I'm having training thoughts in competition, or I'm having competitive thoughts in training, I'm not maximizing my time. And it took years to figure that out and to really be able to have a process of the mental side of things to go along with the physical training that I was doing that was meaningful for me. I dabbled around with concentration tasks and whatnot for a year, concentration grids and counting in my head to maintain focus on a specific task. And I didn't find any of those things to be super beneficial. What I found to be beneficial was turning the lights out when I was actually performing. And I would black out the entire facility I was throwing in, so there's no light except for a red laser dot on my target. Wow. And so I would throw, and I had no idea because I was throwing into a net. So I had no visual feedback and no audible feedback about where the ball went. And it was an exercise strictly to practice. There's my target. I'm going to try to hit it. There's my target. I'm going to try to hit it. And just without the thought in between, because I took away that feedback loop. I've done that with other things in training as well. But that's what I found most effective for me in handling that mental side of things was this is how I can't think about how my body moved, or I missed here, so I have to make this adjustment. It's when I'm competing, it's got to be, this is the task, execute it, repeat it. That monotony of that we talked about a little bit earlier. And then in training, let me evaluate that. Let me say, okay, it's time to train. How am I moving? Well, I'd like to move more this way than that way. Let me design a process and do that. But then I also have to sharpen the sword of competition. And it took me a while to develop that process, but it's fairly unique. I haven't seen a whole lot of other people doing that, and it was super beneficial for me.
This is huge. I mean, this is amazing. I get chills with what you're saying right now, because there's monotony, yes, but there's simplicity. The most spectacular businesses in the world. This is a really big lesson for entrepreneurs, CEOs. You gotta break it down to the simplest equation. And how you said it was so awesome. There's the target. I'm gonna try to hit it. There's the target. I'm gonna try to hit it. There's the target. I'm gonna hit it. I mean, monotonous but simple. I mean, this is the essence of a Major League Baseball player. I mean, this is it. This is what makes you great, and it makes you beyond great. The simplicity of it. And it's if we can break things down to that level of simplicity and then create a process like you mentioned, because this is business. The idea of business is to have a predictable process that creates profits. That's it. There's nothing else to business than that. Here's the target. Let's create a process so we can hit the target on a regular basis. And that is sums up everything for me. So thank you. That is really, really awesome. It's profound.
Yeah,
what you said is so profound.
Someone explained it to me, and they use the analogy of an Oreo cookie. Everyone's familiar with what an Oreo cookie is. You have a cookie. If you're looking at it, you got a cookie on the near side, and then you have frosting, and then you have a cookie on the far side of the Oreo, right? So the cookies are simplicity, and the frosting is complexity. And a lot of people look at the Oreo and they go, oh, great, Oreo, I'm good with that. I see a cookie, that's great. It's fun. And so they live in the simple world without knowing how complex it is.
Right.
Then you have people that are like, oh, I wonder, is there more to this cookie? Let me take off the front layer and let me look at what's behind it. And they see, oh, there's some frosting. This is really good. It tastes pretty good. I wonder what this is made of. Wonder how this works. I wonder how it's stuck to the cookie. And they start, this is complex, right? And figuring out all these things. And a lot of people get mired in the complexity, and they never make it back out the front side to realize how simple it should be, and they never make it to the back side to realize how simple it should be. That complexity is like the training world. That's where you have to live to advance your knowledge and to high grade everything, right? If you can make it to the back side of complexity, you get simple again. Because you realize, man, this is super complex. And at the basic level of it, it all comes down to today, I need to see the red dot and I need to hit it. And I need to do that 100 times. And if I do that 100 times, that's a success for today. And then tomorrow, I'll deal with the complexity and break down why it went well or didn't go well. And I'll work on it. And then when I compete, it's got to be simple. So I'm good now at being able to flip that switch between times that it's good to be complex and times that it has to be simple. And I see a lot of people that want to get there, so they dive into the complexity and they just never make it out the backside.
Yeah,
and
in the brain lab, it's the same way. I watch these docs. I mean, because the nervous system, there might not be anything more complex in the nervous system, and they break it down so a guy like me who knows nothing can actually have profound knowledge around it, because they break it down. And to watch them in their profession is so spectacular. Watch the results because they've simplified the most complex thing on the universe. Just like you were talking about the Oreo cookie. I mean, it is a complex process. Go to the Oreo factory. It's insane. And then ship them out all over the world and provide the perfect. But the fact is, it's simplistic in its nature. And if you could break it down to that, and that gets back to the idea of the lesson, right? In the wisdom of what we talked about earlier. And now you can continue this extraordinary career and become the best in the world, and even at some point become a mentor to others to show them the simplicity of this complex thing you're doing. Spectacular.
Yeah, it's interesting that there's some parallels, actually, Trevor, between what you do and what I did. Like right down to one of the first things I did when I was going to compete in powerlifting was I don't squat facing a mirror. I squat away from it. Because one, we squat away from it in competition, but two, I don't want to have to look at what I'm like. I want to feel what I'm doing. I want to just be able to do this literally with my eyes closed, you know? And also just that basic, again, monotony, right? You know, I've been at a point where I could barely squat 300 pounds. And I worked up to where my best ever was 668. And, you know, it's very interesting because when you have that weight on your back, you're acutely aware of the fact that this could actually crush you to death, right? So it's like a whole nother level of animalistic, like, excitation, you know? But the way people say, well, how did you keep yourself from getting intimidated? Because I was 201.5 pounds when I squatted that. And people say, how do you keep yourself from getting intimidated by that, right? And I said, well, one, because of all the training I've done, right? So whether I train in the gym or I train or I'm lifting in front of thousands of people, it's the same deal. It's the same weight. Just like, you know, the mound is the same height. It's 60 feet away from the plate. It's the same deal, right?
Yep.
And so I've had good times in lifting and I've had bad times in lifting where like training just hasn't been going as well. Maybe I'm carrying a little more fatigue or I'm tight in my hips or whatever. I keep doing the things that I know are what I need to do to progress, even if it's not going that well, because it's like, I'll use the example of, you know, maybe you've had some times, Trevor, I'm sure, when you felt like you had good stuff and you still got chilled.
Oh, yeah.
You were hitting your spots. You were hitting your spots. Now, because, I mean, that's a sport where it's not just you versus weight. You got other people who are participating trying to stop you, right? Lifting is full. But do you say, well, that didn't work? Or you say, well, I hit my spots and it just wasn't my day today. That's kind of what I do with weight. When it gets heavier, how do I not get intimidated? Well, I know that I'm strong enough, and I know that I put the work in. And so I know that if I go out and I execute and I do little things the way they're supposed to be done, I'm going to be able to lift it. based on, obviously I can't just say, well, I will myself to lift 800 pounds. That's not how it works. But if I know I'm within that realm and I'm projected for that, and my training has gone for that, regardless if I never lifted it before, I know it's capable, I know it's possible, and I just go out and execute the way I know it needs to be done, and I trust that the process has worked itself out. And then also my coach has put the weight, like I also have a really good relationship with my coach. I know he will never pick a weight for me on the bar that I can't do. So if he puts it on the bar, I know I'm capable. I just have to execute. And I think, like, very interesting the way you said it. It's simple and complex at the same time, right? Like you break it down, I'm just trying to hit a dot. But then you go to the complex level of, okay, I've got somebody else. What are their tendencies? What do I need to do to get them? What did they see from me last time? What did they miss on? What did they hit on? And I love watching sports. I watched baseball for a long time, but I played all the way through high school. But even now, I love watching football too. And you'll find that, I was listening to a defensive back, and he said, "Yeah, I let this guy have a catch early in the game because I was setting him up for something later." Like, boom! I was like completely mind blown. I was like, "Holy crap!" And then you hear about pitchers who let hitters have a pitch so they can get them out with something later and set them up for something later, or hitters who will let a pitcher kind of make them look a little dumb so they can see it again, and then they know they can hit. Like, that just blows my mind, like that complexity level. I love it.
Yeah, that cat and mouse game. Funny story. 2 years ago, we're playing the Tigers. Miggy is standing on deck, and my buddy Mike Clevenger's pitching, right? So Miggy looks into our dugout and gets Tito's eye and he goes, "Hey, second pitch, change up, homer." Tito's like, "Is he serious? I hope he's not serious." Right? So he comes up, Clevenger throws him a first pitch fastball, strike. Second pitch, change up, and he hits a homer. He kind of looks over his shoulder with a smile on his face. Right? But it's just that level of understanding of he's so in the moment, he's so in tune with what's going on in that game that he knows exactly what Clevenger is going to do. And Clevenger fell into the trap. But it's that experience, it's that knowledge, that wisdom, and preparation. He'd done enough film study. He'd done enough talking to teammates, observing how Clevenger was pitching guys, that confidence through preparation to say, I know exactly what's going to happen, and this is what I'm going to do with it, and then to have that come to fruition, I think it's awesome to watch people that have achieved that level of just that level, period. And
it's almost like a
so
flow.
impressive.
It's like a level of flow where you just it becomes just natural. It becomes like walking, and it's like, wow, how did you master that? I have you might ask another question. I'm just keep jumping in here because you guys are both so fascinating. Layne, I just wanted to ask you about being controversial, about calling people out, about taking that risk. Yeah, putting yourself.
I'm surprised this question isn't directed at me.
Well, it's directed at you as well.
You should read my tweets.
Right? So it's really directed at both of you. I was going to let Layne start off here about, what's it like stepping out into the lion's den, right? Because we kind of started this off. We talked about facts versus feelings and these types of things. And we live in this interesting cultural time right now where I think we're seeing a lot of people stepping out and willing to take the arrows, right? And trying new things and then, testing and getting to the facts. Talk a little bit about what that's like in your career, what that's been like to step into the lion's den, so to speak, and take those risks and say the things that either need to be said but no one's saying, or calling out the people who are sort of, I don't want to say selling snake oil, but the term.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah. So anyway.
I was on the Joe Rogan podcast in September, and the first thing he said, which he's had some people on his show that I thought were kind of full of it, so I was worried that he might be a little bit contentious. But the first thing he said to me that was really love the compliment, he's like, "The industry needs you because you call bullshit." Mm-hmm. He's like, "You're not afraid to call bullshit and call people on it." And in particular, nutrition and fitness just has always lent itself to a lot of witchery and snake oil and, just fuckery in general. Like, sorry, I don't know. Hopefully I'm allowed to curse. But yeah, you're not, but for me, I kind of, when I got into the industry, I didn't want to have people upset at me. I didn't want to, kind of rock the boat too much. And I think nutrition is very interesting because I get this all the time where if we meet and I tell you that I have a PhD in theoretical physics, you're probably not going to have a conversation with me about string theory, right?
Right.
But because everybody eats, everyone and watches TV, with where there's or reads the news or whatnot, everyone has formed an opinion of nutrition. They have opinions about nutrition, right? And so, I always tell people, you're entitled to those opinions. I might just tell you how full of crap they are. But the problem is in the industry I work in, people prey upon that. And nutrition has become religion for a lot of people. And I tell people, I'm like, you've got people who literally, they become so zealous about a certain stance that it really is like talking to a religious cult. Especially I think keto has some benefits especially for neurological disorders, epilepsy. It's shown very high documented benefits. But if you look at the research data, if you equate calories, every single study where we equate calories, it doesn't make a difference on fat loss. But for some people, they don't feel hungry on it. They feel better on it. And so they find it to be a useful tool. But the problem is then we have two different issues. One is that if we look at what we call bros, which are the big meathead gym people or people who are anecdote only, and we look at sciencey bros, which are people who read studies. I'm kind of a little bit of both. Bros make the mistake of because something worked for them, they want to apply it to everyone, right? And science bros make the mistake of, okay, because the average responded best to this treatment in a study, every individual should do that. And what the reality is that we should probably start at the mean in terms of what works for most people, and then massage that to the individuals because there are outliers, right? So baseball no different, right? So I could, and lifting too, I can give one person a cue for a deadlift that just doesn't make any sense to them. And then another person could give them what I felt was the same thing I said, but just worded a little bit differently, and then it clicks. And I'm sure the same thing happens with pitching. Like you try to get somebody to have a certain arm motion or do something with their hand. I never pitched, so I don't know about this stuff. But I'm sure there's just different cues that work for different people and so that's where the individual stuff comes down. But again, there is a certain science because if you look at for say hitters, we know that there's pretty much when you start your swing, there's kind of a semi-optimal stance, right? No matter how somebody starts out, whether they're open stance, closed stance, straight, doing funky stuff with their bat, most of the best hitters are in a very similar stance by the time they actually make their swing. What they're doing before that is cueing, right? So wrapping this back around to me and being controversial and calling out stuff, my problem is not that, when I get into these wars on Twitter with people, is not to say, hey, I'm not saying that didn't work for you. What I'm saying is that it's inappropriate to apply it to other people necessarily in the same way you applied it to yourself. And the other problem is, we just have, because the average person is so scientifically illiterate, the real dangerous people aren't the ignorant people. The real dangerous people are the people who have a little bit of knowledge, who sound like they know what they're talking about. Those are the really dangerous people. Because what people are good at doing is knowing when they knows more than them about a given topic. We're good at determining that, right? What we're not good at is if we have two people who know more about a topic than us, which one of the two is more knowledgeable? Yeah. Right? We're terrible at that. We just don't know. So I love to fish, right? If there's two expert fishermen and they're talking about which knot is better and they're like both argue. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. They both made compelling arguments, right? So that's where it's really difficult to try and get across stuff because, in my new fat loss book I wrote, I basically didn't say that one diet was better than another. I talked about a pattern of behaviors that are congruent amongst people who lose weight and keep it off. It's more about behavior because any diet will mostly work. It's more about your behaviors and what works for you and what's sustainable for you. But again, the industry just lends itself to a lot of quackery, and it always has. And it probably always will. But yeah, I've kind of gotten to the point where I just don't care if people don't like me. I would rather, and people say, well, why can't you just focus on doing your thing? Which is appealing to me because I'm a libertarian. Like I grew up, my parents were like, don't worry about other people's stuff, worry about your own stuff, right? But the problem is that there's a sucker born every minute, so these people aren't just going to get weeded out. And further, they're actually harming people. Like there was just an article I posted yesterday, 2 days ago on my Instagram, that one of the biggest authors of the alkaline diet stuff, Robert Young, by the way, no credentials. He even lied about his naturopathic degree, which is hilarious because the naturopathic degree is pretty shaky to begin with. But he convinced people to do this diet and not get chemotherapy and get sodium bicarbonate injections as IVs, and people died. People died. He was ordered to pay $105 million of restitution to people. But like this kind of stuff, people say, well, why can't you just, because it's like the quote, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. Right. So I know this is wrong, and I know it can harm people. I wouldn't feel right not saying something. And some people don't like my delivery, and they don't like how but if you ask my opinion on something, and I give my opinion, I'm gonna tell you what it is honestly.
I had kind of an experience like that in high school. No, I didn't really have a whole lot of friends. No one really liked me. My coaches talked poorly about me behind my back. My teammates made fun of me nonstop, and I couldn't figure this out, right? Because I'm looking at myself. I'm like, man, I do well in school. I study. I work hard. I'm an athlete. I'm decent at baseball. I'm not the best. I don't act like I'm the best. Like, what is it? I got up one morning. I went to the pool at 5 a.m., got back, took a shower, was getting ready for school, and I looked in the mirror, and I said, I was just dreading going to school. It's like, oh, here's another day of it, right? And I said, what is so wrong with me that no one likes me? I was like looking in the mirror, and I was like, I like me. And I just distinctly remember that day, like, I just decided, like, I'll be responsible to myself for my self-worth instead of answering to everybody else out there. And from that day forward, I just made the decision, I'm going to say what I want to say. I'm going to do what I want to do. I'll be responsible for the consequences for it. I'll be right here to take them. But that's just how I choose to live my life. And it was really a freeing experience because now it's so much more simple. Like, if I mess up, I messed up. If I succeed, I succeeded. Instead of, well, I did this, but 300 people on Instagram said they liked it, but 150 people said they didn't, and now I don't know if that was okay, and I'm trying to please everybody for my self-worth. I don't think that. I don't think that's for sure not the way I want to live my life. I think people would be happier if they were more responsible, I guess, to themselves and for their self-worth. I had a question for you, Layne, on the whole topic of snake oil salesmen and stuff on Twitter. Does it bother you if people?
Sorry, go ahead.
People who very clearly have not put the time or the effort in to understanding the subject, like come at you and try to tell you like how to live your life or like what to do. Like that's the part that just annoys the hell out of me on Twitter, because I spend my entire life studying baseball, and people come along and say, like, well, you have to do this, or have you ever thought about doing this? It's like,
No, never.
what do you do it all day?
So it's funny. There was a tweet the other day from somebody. I can't remember who it was from, but it said, "Imagine 2000." It was like 2018 when people on Twitter, when people actually believe that they know more than the scientists actually doing the real research. What a time to be alive! That's just so true. And I said, listen, like my businesses have done well, but I'm not out popping bottles on yachts and that kind of stuff. Like, I live a relatively modest life, but I've done well more than I thought I would do for when I was a kid. But I told people, I'm like, don't you think I wanted to find like magic foods when I went to grad school? Like, don't you like that I wanted to find something amazing or just world shattering that would just change? Of course I did, because if I found something like magic food or dietary protocol, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I'm out in the Pacific Ocean on a 400-foot yacht popping bottles. Because you know what I mean? That's the fitness industry, not just fitness industry, but the hey, I want to be less fat industry is multiple $billion industry, right? Like people who come up with stuff that doesn't even do anything make billions of dollars.
Yes.
Imagine if you had something that actually like really did, But there aren't magic foods. There isn't a magic diet. It's all context dependent. It's the same arrogance as saying, Trevor, to you, be like, well, if you just did this one simple thing, if you just held the ball like this, if you just threw it this motion, it's like, no, dude, don't you? Yeah, you've been doing this your entire life. Have you tried? Yes, I've tried it. Shut up. And it's interesting. I'm going to be on a podcast next week where I'll be debating this guy who promotes what's called the carnivore diet. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but it's an all meat diet, and people. It's just incredible. People. I never thought I'd be in it because my research was actually sponsored by the beef industry and the dairy industry and the egg industry. And I never thought I'd be in a position where I had to defend plants. Like, I'm like so mind blown right now because like if you don't come up with something that's extreme, it's like it doesn't sell. Like because people want that simple answer. Well, the answer overall is simple for the obesity crisis. We need to find a way for people to eat less calories than they are burning. That people want to argue energy balance, but at the end of the day, that's what it goes back to. It is the law of thermodynamics. You cannot get around it. Okay? Now, people make the mistake of, well, like say a high protein diet, for example. If you eat a high protein diet versus a lower protein diet, you equate calories, you'll get better fat loss on a high protein diet. But that doesn't mean that calories in, calories out is invalid. What it means is that there's higher energy expenditure on a higher protein diet. We can explain what's happening. Like it's not magic, right? So, but I could get more into the complexities of diet. The point being that when somebody asks me about any diet, I'm always like asking questions and trying to get context and trying to get a lot of information because it depends on the individual. Just like if, hopefully, I'm sure Trevor can speak to this, your coaches don't coach everybody the exact same way, right?
Like, surprised.
So, but everybody has got different stuff that works for them.
Yeah.
And people who do this stuff correctly, they identify that. They're really good at identifying, okay, that's probably going to work better for that person versus that person, that sort of thing. But yes, it absolutely drives me nuts when people who don't have any business talking about it, no, that's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, like, come at it from the prospect of humility, because I don't have all the answers. I know I don't have all the answers. My God, like, you want to feel inferior? Go do a PhD, because you will learn how much you do not know. Like, it's just endless. I know a little bit about a tiny speck of the universe, a little bit, But I'm able to admit that. I'm also able to admit when I get stuff wrong. That's the difference. Like, there's been plenty of stuff I've changed my mind about. That's just science. As we get more data, we learn more. But, some of these charlatans, they kind of make these hand-waving arguments, and, it's just really frustrating. So, like, with the carnivore diet that I'm going to be debating against, it's all anecdote. People say, well, look at all these people who are doing well on this diet. I said, that's a type 1 error. Like, that's what we call confirmation bias. Like, there's probably people who aren't doing well on it. Guess what? They're probably not tweeting at you. They're not talking about how they couldn't lose any weight. They're not talking about autoimmune problems.
Look at all the pro baseball players who are super successful and they drink all the time.
Yeah.
Be good.
Yeah, that's not a validation of anything. Or they use chewing tobacco or whatever. Like, right. It's at best, it's not optimal, or it just doesn't impair them. But at worst, they could have been better if they hadn't done that, right? Like, that's what I say is, like, that's not validation of anything, And I use this example. I'm like, you can't. What I always get is somebody will make a claim, and I'll say, "Where's your evidence for that?" And they'll say, "Well, you don't have any evidence that it's not true." I said, "You don't understand how logic works, okay? I can claim that I go outside and talk to my tree at night and that the tree talks back to me. And if you say, well, where's your evidence? I said, well, you can't prove that it doesn't do that. Yes, I can. I'm going to come sit down there and talk to your tree. It didn't talk. Oh, that's because it's telepath. It just talks directly to me. You just can't hear it. You can't prove a negative. So it's just, but it's difficult because, like I said, most people, I don't want to bag on the education systems because the government has a tough job doing this, but like they just don't get taught basic logic, like principles of basic logic. Because if you understand principles of basic logic, you can kind of be a BS detector, Like you can usually, if you ask the right questions, you can distill it down.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a quote. Winston Churchill has a quote. It goes, "The truth is incontrovertible. Malice may attack it, ignorance may deride it, but in the end, there it is." It's kind of like same with logic. It's like, and it's interesting because what I see you doing is taking a stand for the truth. And if people are out there being charlatans and selling snake oil, you're willing to take that stand, which is a very powerful stand to take.
I look at myself as I'm a consumer advocate.
Right.
That's how I kind of look at myself. And I just say, somebody said the other day, like, don't you think you're like, your abrasiveness, like you're not going to win anybody over. I said, well, I'm not trying to do that. Those people, if they're entrenched in an idea, you're not going to change them. What I'm arguing with this person for is for the people who are watching who may be undecided.
Right.
Or maybe I can plant just that little seed of doubt where they start to question this stuff and go, I never thought about it that way. Right?
Yeah.
So when you do that, I mean, I had somebody, just for example, there was a debate in 2015 between Gary Taubes, who's a big advocate of what's called the carbohydrate insulin obesity model of obesity, which basically disregards calories in, calories out, and says you just need to keep your insulin low. If you just eat low carb, you'll lose fat. My response is always, how come these people aren't shredded all the time? Because if you can eat as much fat as you want, no carb, then person with the lowest insulin level should just be like shredded all the time, but they aren't. But anyway, this guy was in a debate, and he was dismissing all these studies that I've talked about that showed when you equate for calories that there's just no difference. And he was talking, well, it's funded by this, it was funded by that, and this happened and whatever. And he says, but I'm funding studies that will prove that the carbohydrate insulin model is correct. And I raised my hand and I said, you realize that like just that statement in and of itself is wrong. Like you can't prove anything in science. And you're also not supposed to go into an experiment trying to prove something. So, which actually his experiments ended up they ended up showing the opposite. But what was interesting was somebody asked him, they said, if your studies don't support what you're saying, will you change your mind? And he said, no, I wouldn't change my mind. And I threw my arms up and I walked out of the theater. I said, what are we having this conversation for? Like, this is a waste of time. This is useless. one of the coolest things about my PhD was I changed the way I ate because I got some data back that I didn't expect that didn't fit with my bias. And I had to sit there and have this like cognitive dissonance moment where I'm like, I don't want to give up this thing I'm doing because it would admit that I'm wrong. But if I don't change, then I'm saying that I don't believe my own data, right? And that was like so I had to change the way I ate because of my PhD. And that was actually so cool. That was my favorite freaking thing by the time I came out of grad school. Because, like, how cool is that? That the stuff you did actually changed the way you did. I thought that was so cool. But that requires a level of sacrifice of ego that people who get kind of their identity attached to these, like, go look at these people argue with on Twitter sometimes. You want some entertainment. Some of these, if you go to their profile, it will say in their profile, low carb or carnivore or vegan, or their identity is a diet.
Yes.
Think about that for a second. So that's why I get so much blowback.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great stuff. I can I can identify with everything you're saying. So parallel. It's unbelievable.
Well, at least I don't have to go out and do it in front of 50,000 people every 5 days and have them tell me how much I suck if I don't kill it, you know? That's my favorite thing, too, is when people say something, because you touched on it earlier, people say, oh, this guy sucks. I'm like, you realize that guy who you're saying sucks, even if he's not having a good day, was the best guy on his college team. It was the best guy on his high school team. That if you're in professional sports, you're a freaking stud. Like,
Beyond.
period, full
You're
stop.
top 1% of your chosen industry. You know,
Yeah.
it's by being in pro ball.
I'm just like people like Mark Sanchez got, oh, Sanchez sucks. Sanchez, if you went out and just watched him in practice, like throwing a football, and you were just an average dude, you'd be freaking mind blown.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So don't say it's. Guess what? The guys he's going up against, they get paid too. You know what I mean? Like that's why I always tell people the best powerlifters don't even do powerlifting. They're in the NFL. Like if those guys could get the money that we could get, or if powerlifters could get the money that guys in the NFL were getting, cool, you'd see some big squats and deadlifts. Let me tell you what, like you'd see some amazing stuff.
Yeah, Saquon Barkley had like all sorts of records at the combine, right? Like,
He's got tree trunks.
Who was that?
Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, I didn't see. So the one thing I always worry about when I hear these numbers from football players is I've seen some of the lifts at college, and they go down about that far, you know. But to be fair, there are some legit studs out there, and I watched that guy a little bit because I was watching the Monday night game that the Giants were on. That dude is a stud. And the other thing I tell people is if you've never seen NFL football in real life, like sitting on the 50-yard line, you cannot understand how fast and how violent these people are. You cannot appreciate it. I remember watching, well, I was a big Colts fan. I was watching Colts Jags back in 2007, the first football game I went to, and I remember watching Maurice Jones-Drew stick his foot down in the ground, and a split second later, he was clear across the field. And I just remember thinking, how can you even do that without your body exploding? Like, the kind of violent forces that you're putting on your body, it's just incredible. You know what I mean? I think some of the best athletes are also just injury resistant. Like, people say a guy's injury prone. No, the guys that were injury prone never even made it to the big time. Right. You know what I mean? They got injured in high school.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all great stuff.
Yeah, so you can sit and appreciate just how awesome it is what you do. Like you basically like violate what the human body should be able to do on a daily basis. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So we're in 2 podcast territory right now. So I wanna give you guys a chance to kind of round this out by asking each other something. So I'm sure you guys both kind of came in with something that you wanted to learn from one another that might not have been asked yet. But if whoever wants to say it first, if you guys got something, go. I don't want to leave anything kind of left untouched.
Yeah. The building blocks of a diet, if you had to strip it down to like one thing to explain, if you had to give one thing to explain all of diet, like, what would that, like, what would that be?
Oh man, there's so many different directions to take this with. But so like, let's say I was sitting down with somebody and I had 5 minutes with them to try and figure out what would be best for them. That's how I'm going to take this. Would that be okay?
Yep, perfect.
So the first thing I'm going to try and figure out is, what is that person's lifestyle like, right? So how active are they? What do they like to eat? How do they eat currently? And I'm going to try and give them principles that they can use. So depending on, because everybody, like, just write down the goal. Some people don't want to lose weight. Some people want to gain weight. Like, I'm sure there was a time in your life, Trevor, where you were probably trying to gain weight, right? So baseball players have the opposite problem with most people. They're like high calorically expenditure. They're trying to figure out ways to gain weight, right?
Yep.
So my strategy for somebody like that is going to be completely different than somebody who's trying to lose weight and is a housewife and doesn't have that much activity, right?
Yep.
So I think the first principle is, okay, finding out what do they maintain their body weight on calorie-wise, right? So what, in their current lifestyle, how many calories do they consume and maintain their weight? And I can usually figure that out. The reason I want to know that is because now, if I know that information, now we can make the adjustments that need to be made in order to take them to whichever goal they want, right? So if you want to gain weight, well, now we know what you maintain on. Now we know what the threshold is, probably for having to increase that. We know what somebody maintains on. We can find, okay, what do we need to take off that in order to lose, right? And then from there, I start worrying about, okay, well, higher protein, higher fiber, usually better for weight loss. If you're somebody who wants to maximize muscle mass and lean body mass, higher protein also good. Not magic, but also a little bit better. And then right down to like the individualistic nature of, for example, athletes. This is very interesting. I'm going a little bit on a side tangent, but there was a study done in Bengali workers in the 1950s. And one of the real benefits of exercise is it normalizes your satiety signals. So what they found was that they looked at people who had light activity, moderate, or really like heavy labor. And they found that their nutritional intake, these guys didn't track nutrition. The researchers tracked it for them. They almost linearly increased their calorie intake depending on just naturally based on their output, right? People who were sedentary actually ate more than the lightly or moderately active groups, right? So what you find is this J-shaped curve. So people who exercise actually tend to have better satiety signals and aren't hungry all the time necessarily until they get to a real heavy workload. So for a lot of, for example, baseball players and athletes, the problem is they just don't have that much hunger, right? So if you take somebody like that and you say, well, I want you to eat chicken, rice, broccoli, because these are healthy foods, good luck getting them to down 3,500 calories that way. You know what I mean? So I have people who are like, athletes who can eat a lot of food, maintain their body weight. They're eating unhealthy foods sometimes, or quote-unquote unhealthy foods, because there's just no way they could get the amount of calories they require to perform on foods that are that filling, right? So right down to, like, that's how individualistic it has to be, that sometimes bad foods can be good, depending on your activity level. So that's kind of where I just start.
Yeah.
Let's see, a question for you. I guess, just from a personal standpoint, because I'm curious, does a day stand out to you as your worst day and a day stand out to you as your best day in baseball? It can be from any era, regardless, high school, little league, whatever, professional. Is there a day that stands out, and why does it stand out that way? And if you don't know, it's fine to say I don't know.
Oh, no.
Pick which one.
That's a good question.
I think the worst days stand out a little bit more than the best days.
Yeah, of course.
One of the best days of my career was when they announced that I won the Golden Spikes, because I'd gone to college like with that specific personal goal in mind. And I wanted to go to Omaha as a team, play in the College World Series, and I wanted to win the Golden Spikes. So in 2010, we went to Omaha. We came in second, which sucked, but just like being in that environment, getting to experience it was such a huge goal of mine. And then at the announcement of the Golden Spikes, like that was such a big personal accomplishment for me. I got a tremendous amount of satisfaction out of that, and gratification out of all the hard work that I put in and the time and the effort and all that different stuff. The worst days, though, yeah, I had an outing. I mentioned it earlier. I mentioned one of them earlier when my agent's like, "Oh, you might get called up after the game," and then I go in 2/3 and give up 10 runs. And like looking back on that, it's just kind of like it's kind of comedic now, Yeah. But one of the probably the worst day of my career was it's 2013. I'm in AAA, and I got called up to a couple times earlier that season to make a spot start. This is the first year the Indians had traded for me, and they gave up a good amount to get me, so I'm expected to perform at a certain level, And so we have a doubleheader. I'm in AAA. The big league team has a doubleheader in Chicago. So they call me up to make one of the starts. And so I start the first game, and I don't get out of the first inning. I walked a couple people, gave up like 4 or 5 hits. I gave up 5 runs in 2/3 of an inning and didn't get out of the first. So now the bullpen has to cover 8 1/3 innings in the first game, right? And so like I'm sitting in the clubhouse in the first inning. Like my job was to come up and throw 6 or 7 innings, regardless of how I did, to cover innings so that the bullpen could somehow manage to cover 2 games in a day, right?
Yeah.
I go thirds. We ended up winning the game, like 19-10 or something like that.
Wow.
Right. So yeah. So no one had a good day. Right? And then we still had another game on the back end of it. So they had called Carlos Carrasco up to the big leagues. He was going to make that start. He was actually in AAA with me, but they had called him up kind of permanently to fill a spot, and I was just making a spot start. And so he ended up going 4 1/3 inning in the second game. So now the bullpen's covering, 4 2/3 there and 8 1/3, so that's 13 innings total. And there's 8 guys down there. So some guys had to pitch in the first game, recover ice, do all that stuff, and then pitch again in the second game. So we won both games, so it turned out okay as a team. But I just remember like sitting in the clubhouse, like not only did I suck, not only did I get like embarrassed personally, but now I just put 8 guys in the bullpen and the remaining 25 guys on the roster out because I couldn't even get through an inning, much less like throw 100 pitches and try to help the team out. I just remember feeling like the worst. Like,
because you felt like you let your team down.
Yeah, I wasn't even disappointed in myself. It was like the disappointment of like I literally negatively contributed to this group of people trying to win today and trying to do what they're doing this season. Like, not only was I just 0, I was negative, and that was like a very hard thing for me to take.
Yeah, once you're yanked, that's it. There's no going back in. You don't get another shot at it. That's.
And then from the professional side, what was a highlight in the professional side?
What was that?
What was a highlight on the professional side in your pro career? What's a big highlight?
Oh man, there's a lot. Game 1 of I pitched game 1 of the ALDS in 2016. That was my first playoff experience against the Red Sox, who were the best team in baseball that year. I'm facing Big Papi and Dustin Pedroia, like all these dudes that I watched like growing up, and the atmosphere in Cleveland and the crowd and the noise and the excitement. It was my first experience with like professional baseball that like really, really meant something. Because you play during the regular season and every game means something, but there's 162 of them. And then you get to the postseason and it's like, if we lose this game, we're done. And so it's a very much more like college or high school that kind of takes on that feel of like every game is like the most important thing, you know? So just like that atmosphere, and then I give up a run in the first and give up a double, and another run's going to score, and the team makes a great defensive play and stops it. And then in the third inning, we hit like back-to-back home runs, and the stadium was just losing its mind. Just that specific moment, given it was my first experience like with playoff baseball, just really stands out. Above playing in the World Series, above any other playoff experience I had or any like personal accomplishment I had. Like that atmosphere was just so enjoyable.
Cool.
That's cool. Okay, one more question, because I actually wondered this while you're so you said you got to the major leagues and it was different than your expectation in terms of the lifestyle. Now, I'm going to guess, because I feel like I might know, and you can correct me. I feel like it would be a lot of sitting on buses, planes, and hotel rooms. I feel like that is probably a lot of what the lifestyle is, and it's not that glamorous. Am I close?
100%. Yeah. It's because all you see growing up is the game, right?
Yeah.
So you see bright lights are on. You're like, man, this guy made this awesome play, and like was excited about it. Like that must be so cool, and all these people cheered for him, and he's a superstar, and everybody loves this dude, and whatever, right? And then you get into it, and it's like, okay, one, these guys aren't like superstars; they're people, you know. And so there's like they're just people, which obviously you know, right? But you just don't realize it. And then it's they don't really do anything. You know, I don't want to discredit anybody. Like they're working very hard on some stuff, right? But you're spending 4 hours on a plane, and then you get in and you sleep, and then you get up at noon because you got in at 4 o'clock in the morning. You're trying to get some sleep, and you got to be at the field at 1:30, and so you grab some lunch somewhere and you go sit in the locker room, and then you go out and stand and shag BP, and then there's just this like there's so much behind the scenes. There's so much work that goes into it and time invested into it that isn't glamorous, and some of the monotony of it, that it just like it ruins the illusion that this is the
show,
greatest lifestyle. This is the show. This is Broadway. This is just all that similar, I'm sure, in other industries, right? Like you see movies, you're like, man, that would be like to be a movie star, like to have people come and watch me on a screen acting. That's awesome, right? And then you're on set for 2 years in a small trailer with someone else that you don't really like in front of a green screen, acting it out 200 different times. And then by the time you see the movie, you're so sick of the lines that you had to say that you don't even see the movie, right? Like that's kind of like a good parallel of like what it was like getting into it versus what the illusion of it was.
Well, that's why you gotta love it. And that's I also said I've had this debate with people who complain about baseball players' salaries, and I say, well, first off, it's because they're worth it, because they generate revenue, because people are butts in seats and eyeballs on TV, so they have a rare skill, and a lot of people want to see that skill, so that's why they get paid that. And also because they live a lifestyle that most people would freaking hate. Like I travel a lot for work. I probably travel 2 times a month. And that feels like a lot. You know what I mean? You guys are going every day. And it's like, well, they got all this money, they can go out and do this. Well, okay, you get in, you just finish a game, you're flying to your next city. Oh, what are you going to go in and go out? Oh, well, you got to play tomorrow too, by the way. You know what I mean? You guys' break, your big break is 3 days. You know?
Yeah.
Like that's a huge break for most people. I'm guessing fly home, just so they can see their family.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a tough gig, and I think you're right. I think when we see people, I had this not the same experience as you, but I was in a gym close to me training, and somebody came up to me, this kid, and he was like just shocked. He was like, "You're Layne Norton, right?" I'm like, "Yeah, nice to meet you. What's your name?" Talk to him for a second. He's like, "I'm sorry, I just never thought that you would train in a place like this." And I said, "Well, I got trained somewhere." You know, like I'm sure you've had the experience before where so you're getting coffee here. Well, I gotta get coffee somewhere. You know, like you're still a person. So it's I think that's cool that you have that self-awareness and then that also being willing to talk about it, because a lot of people will make it they want to make it like it's like a big glamorous lifestyle, but I'm sure it's not. There's a reason only a few people do it. It's tough life.
Yeah, it's a great life. Like I wouldn't change it. I enjoy it. I love it. Because you get used to, it's just part of the job, right? But I've lived out of a suitcase for the last 3 years. Like even when I'm like at home, I'm up in Seattle training and I'm at an Airbnb or I'm in an extended stay hotel. I stayed one off season. I stayed in an extended stay hotel for 2.5 months for training because I couldn't find a place. And I was planning on getting an Airbnb, but then with training and stuff, I just stayed in an extended stay hotel for 2 months.
When I was going through a divorce, I was in an extended stay for 2 months, so I know, not exactly glamorous. I know. Yeah. So people just don't see the behind the scenes, right? They see the final product. They don't see the process. And I think that's probably a good way to tie this whole conversation off. Like, there's a lot of work that goes into success. There's a lot of hours spent studying, working, putting out fires, etc. And people just see the final product, and you don't realize like all the effort that goes into it. But that's what makes success. Is all those hours that no one's looking, that you put in all this time and effort, and then something great pops out at the end.
Yeah. Great.
No, I love it.
Agreed.
Guys, this is awesome. I appreciate you guys kind of sharing some insight behind the scenes, and I think this is one of the probably most valuable episodes that we've had. So it's gonna be really fun. We're gonna break it up into a 2-part series. Obviously, we're 2 hours in. It's the longest one we've ever had, but I think it got to that point because the conversation, the content was awesome.
Yeah, I love meeting guys like you. Is there social media, Twitter handle or Instagram handle that you could give the audience so they could follow you?
Bio Layne for me. BIOLAYNE.
Great.
Yep, and Bauer Outage, BAUEROUTAGE. Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff.
Cool. Awesome. Layne, anything you want to plug?
I would say Bio Layne on all social media, and anybody who's interested in bodybuilding contest prep, which isn't probably too much of your audience, but I have a book called The Complete Contest Prep Guide, and then I have a book that should be out in probably 2 to 3 weeks, an ebook called Fat Loss Forever, and that will be my probably 400-page fat loss manifesto, which I think will be really useful for a lot of people. So,
awesome.
Yeah, you look like you picked it up.
I'll definitely be picking that up.
What about you, Trev?
Oh, if you're interested in learning more about like what goes into behind the scenes of athletics and players' personalities off the field and kind of breaking down illusion of just seeing them on the field, and you want to know more about the players, I'm starting up a company. Should be launching here in the next month or so. It's called Momentum Films, and it's going to be kind of diving into players off the field and their personalities and what makes them tick. So
love it.
Keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, congrats, guys. That was great.
Guys, thanks so much.
Thank you.
We'll wrap it up.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Take care, guys.
See you guys.
Have a great one.
And that is a wrap on today's episode of Success at Success, 2 hours long. This conversation was originally scheduled to be a quick hour-long conversation, but you can see what happens when big thinkers get behind closed doors and have a chance to really talk. Go follow those guys, Layne and Trevor both. Go to successatsuccess.com. And if you want updates of when the new podcasts are dropping, subscribe to the email list. And now I'll leave you alone. Get back to the rest of your week. Kick ass, conquer it, and I will see you next time.